Thanks for asking me to do this. Before I get into it, let me just say that as someone who was pretty close to David Stone, I want to express my appreciation for how well the mining community turned out to be there for him and his family. It was an important moment in mining history and in Alaska history and Juneau history, and I don't think I admire you all for doing what you did. It was an important time. Roads to Resources was born during the Murkowski administration. When it seems like it's going well, lots of people take credit for it, and I don't really know who all should be entitled to credit for initiating it, but it's born kind of the realization that the federal program for road development in the United States focuses on safety and capacity rather than on access to new locations or access to enable economic development. So it was determined that there needed to be some new program, new initiative done that would direct state resources or even private capital to providing access to places where economic development could occur. The kinds of resources we're talking about are pretty much anything that fits the category. Certainly mining is the preeminent resource or the preeminent activity that we're trying to support here, but oil and gas, forestry, lots of other, all of the typical Alaska resources. I suppose even recreation could be considered a resource in the economic sense. So I am now going to attempt to use this device, which I have never used before. Don't clap until you mean it. The program is based on not necessarily providing superhighways to resource locations, but some kind of basic physical access, surface access, so that you can, if not explore, at least develop found plays. So we're focusing our attention on smaller things. There's the guidelines. Now let me just talk a little bit about how this can work. The model for it actually was born of the Red Dog Mine. ADA, the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority, financed the Red Dog Road and loading facility. They raised money from private capital, paid for the road, and when Red Dog got into revenue positive status, they started paying it back. It took a while to really make it sing, but it's working fine now, and ADA is sitting on nearly $500 million worth of cash money, and they are well respected in the financial world. So for some of the other projects you're going to hear about today, ADA is going to be a partner in raising the construction capital that will eventually be paid off by the beneficiaries, and let's talk about a couple of those. These are the principal projects we're working on now. The uppermost one, Umiat, is about 100 miles from the Dalton Highway and is thought to be an important oil and gas resource. It'll cost upwards of $200 million to build a road to Umiat. We are in the environmental review process now. A draft environmental impact statement is expected later this year or early next. The actual schedule for that is controlled by the Corps of Engineers, but once the permits are in hand, then ADA would sell bonds, raise money, build a road, and then the developer of oil and gas in Umiat, Link Energy, once they got their development going, they would start paying those bonds back. Same basic idea for the Ambler access road. Now we're talking about 200 miles of road through virgin territory, lots of bridges. The road would be very rudimentary, gravel road with intervisible turnouts, single lane. Both of these situations may require restricted access to the road. You may want to hold it to professional drivers that have special training and radios and all of that kind of thing. There are local access issues, concerns over more hunters than before and so forth, but there's also a great deal of anticipation over reduced fuel and food prices and that kind of thing. So it's a new world for a lot of these parts of Alaska, and I think it's going to be exciting times lie ahead. But as anyone who develops a mine knows, these things take a long time to come to fruition. But the Ambler Mining District is particularly fascinating. There are 4 and I think maybe 5 different mine prospects out there. The most advanced of those is Nova Copper, one of the richest copper finds in the world. They alone will pay for that road once they get going. Our anticipated timing for the Ambler Road coincides with about the anticipated timing for when they would start construction of their mine. So they alone could pay for the initial Pioneer Road. Add to that the other mining prospects out there, and you've got economic throw weight that could turn that thing into a superhighway over time. Tanana is probably one that we're going to pay for ourselves. It is just a short road from the existing end of the Tofty Road near Manly Hot Springs. Go about 25 miles to the confluence of the Tanana and Yukon rivers. That doesn't get you into downtown metropolitan Tanana itself, but it gets you within a short boat ride, and there will be a river ferry that completes the link. So that is already traversable. This last summer, residents of Tanana were gifted with chainsaws, and they brushed the route down to flush with the ground. And now they're running their snow machines on that route. They'll be able to run four-wheelers on it in the summer. We expect to build that in the next 2 or 3 years, depending on how elaborate the permitting has to be. There are resources. Somebody laugh at the word elaborate? There is hope that we can do that one without a full-on environmental impact statement. The resources here are a variety of small opportunities, placer and that kind of thing, that are scattered all around that part of the world. So there's no one single large beneficiary that would pay for bonds, and it's a much less expensive undertaking than some of these others. And I'll talk about the Klondike in a minute. Our program for this upcoming fiscal year that we're requesting is much more modest than it's been in the past. There's improvements to the Dalton. There's more money for Ambler that would go to Alaska Industrial ADA, and then a $2 million kind of general fund for small studies, some of which I'll talk about in a minute. This is the Umiat potential. Now, it has to be said that Link Energy, the sponsor in Umiat, also is busy elsewhere around the world, and they apparently have made a huge petroleum find in Australia. We hope this doesn't turn their affections from us, but it could be. It's a huge find, we're told, and it may be difficult to keep their attention. These are the options for getting to Foothills. If anybody wants to ask a question as I go ahead. I can probably handle the stress.
Murray?
Oh, somebody takes me up on it.
On the Tanana Road, who owns the land?
Lots of people, mostly us, mostly the state.
Is there federal land that you have to cross?
I don't think so. Those are some of the early numbers for Ambler. These are probably out of date by now. When you look at the recent announcements from Nova Copper, I think this is pretty old data here, but it gives you an idea of the economic significance of the Ambler mining district. These are the Ambler options, and you can see we looked at options from both east and west, coming from the Bering Strait side as well as the Dalton Highway side. The shorter and drier routes appear to be rising from the Dalton. Some facts about the Tanana. And there's a semi-easy-to-read slide showing the end of the existing Tofty Road and how we would go across to get to the confluence. Now, going further west from Tanana is a possibility. There are other mining prospects on the north side of the river, further west. You would have to go by Ruby to get to them, but it's something we ought to be looking at in the next year or two. Industrial use highway is the term that we use when we're setting up a toll system for overweight or oversized vehicles on our roads. Right now, the Klondike Highway is an IUH highway that has a special toll system. You'll see why we have to confront this with more, we have to exert ourselves more on this subject in a minute, but basically the law requires that you keep your trucks to a certain weight and certain length, certain width. If you want to go heavy, as every mine producer in Yukon does, then we have to provide some way to accommodate you so that you can use our roads and pay a little extra for the privilege. We've had an IUH system in place for the Klondike since 1985. It has made some money, and we have spent it on the Klondike, and we now accommodate hundreds of these B-train truck combinations that weigh up to 160,000 pounds, rumbling down the Klondike into Skagway to load out ocean-going ships. This is what we're looking at we were looking at in the Yukon in 2010. They have updated this map, which maybe is on the next slide. No, it's not. That is one of the problems on the Klondike Highway. That's the William Henry Bridge. And right now, one of these 160,000-pound rigs has to slow down to 5 miles an hour, wait until there's no other traffic on that bridge, cross down the center line at 5 miles an hour. So that is the weak link on the Klondike. Southeast region is addressing the matter. They will probably propose to replace that bridge with a solid fill. You can kind of see how there's room for it. Oh, this has a pointer. See, that's kind of the bottom of the gorge right there, about 300 feet down. So the thought is that they would fill that with rock and then just have a regular solid roadway across the gorge. Sources for the rock could come from further up on the highway. Right now, the delivery of mineral concentrate is hampered at the border. There is a bypass lane for these trucks to bypass the Border Patrol station, but it isn't long enough, and it flows back together uphill with the lane that other people have to wait in to go through the border crossing. To lengthen that truck bypass lane would generate a lot of rock, and that might be the source for filling up this gap. These are some of the other projects we're working on, and I'm particularly interested, I think the state is particularly interested in the West Susitna project, and I have a new graphic for that. This is the so-called West Susitna study area. It is 9,633 square miles in size. I would point out that the state of Vermont is 9,614 square miles in size. New Hampshire is 9,300, New Jersey 87. This study area is the same size as Connecticut, Delaware, and Rhode Island combined. This is a lot of real estate, but there's thought to be a lot of interest. Now, there's a bunch of snowflake-looking things there on the west side. Those are initial mineral plays that have been found by our contractor. The contractor is HDR Alaska, and this drawing came from the project kickoff meeting we had with them earlier this week. Now, the challenges are the Susitna River itself, how to get across it. Do we get across it, or do we use the existing bridge up here? This bridge gives access to a road system in here that is improving because of a number of timber sales that have occurred there. It was little more than a trail until recently, I'm told, and that may be the way to get access to the upper part of the study area, is this road right here. But you've got the Yentna River right here. So if you want to have a crossing to get over into here, you either cross the Yentna from there, or to avoid two river crossings, you cross the Susitna somewhere in there. So why would you do this? The last thing we want to do is get involved in another bridge to nowhere. We haven't been involved in a bridge to nowhere, but we've been accused of it. So what all is over there that needs surface access? Well, there are lots of mining prospects. There is a state forest that is brewing up. There's geothermal potential. There's oil and gas. There's a lot of resource potential on the west side of the Susitna River, all of which would benefit from connection to the rest of the Alaska road system. We're spending about $200,000 on this reconnaissance study right now. It'll be over with in midsummer. We will issue a report, and if I am an optimistic kind of guy, and the people behind this and that have basically been urging us to do it are optimistic people, and I think we will find that there are billions of dollars worth of reasons to provide surface access into the west side. There will be people who are unhappy at the prospect. There are remote cabins. There are people that engage in various sporting activities over there. There's some remote wilderness lodges. But if you're entering an area the size of Vermont or New Hampshire, you would think there's some place we could build a road or two without stepping on too many toes. So we'll give it our best shot. Any questions about West Susitna? I expected to see more interest about that. Sir?
Isn't there a winter road that goes to Tynwick right now, or have you looked at that as a possible?
You can get across the Susitna some of the time in the winter. And there were power lines built across it from the Beluga power plant. Sir?
Are you aware of the, I think it was 1993 study that had 28 miles of a bridge, 1,400-foot bridge across the Susitna developed by DOT itself?
Yes, well, that's part of the database, and I have the maps for the original right-of-way for that, and that's kind of where you start. But we have to, in this day, you have to show all the potential alternatives once you go into the full-on environmental process, and I expect that this would require a full-on environmental impact statement. Holy cow, that's it. Are there questions? Sir?
You mentioned the road to Tanana that they might push on to Ruby to develop mineral resources. You really don't even have to go that far from Tanana to get into the Melizitna country that Rod was talking about. There's really a lot of potential there. It may be only about 20 miles or so out of Tanana.
Is it on the north side of the...
Yes, it's on the north side. It's on the Tanana side of the Yukon River.
Okay, and is anybody actively exploring out there now?
Yeah, there's a number of companies that are.
Okay, then we need to talk.
Yeah, I forgot to point out that the Melizitna area map that I showed straddles that preferred route for the Ambler Road, the last one that we knew of.
Okay, that's a bit north from what we're talking about here, though, right? For Ambler. That does.
Oh, I'm sorry, no, it was the preferred route for the western access.
Okay.
Corridor goes right through there.
Sir.
In the road to Bocan Mountain and the one to Niblack, I think the one to Bocan right now, Senator Murkowski has introduced a bill to try to get this changed. I know that's not exactly what you're...
I did want to talk about that, actually, Mike. Senator Murkowski has introduced a bill along with Senator Begich. I was criticized for not mentioning both senators as sponsors of this bill at a meeting not long ago. That would do a couple things. It shows a route to the Niblack location from the existing Prince of Wales Island Road system. It is called S3330. Interestingly, the route information was supplied by the Bocan Mountain sponsor. This was done largely at the behest of the Prince of Wales Island communities, because they want to have a shot at working at both of those mines the same as the Ketchikan community would want a shot at it. The second thing that's interesting about it is the bill would contains a get out of jail free card for the roadless rule that would otherwise impair the ability to build road in that part of the world. This bill just waives it. So the question is, how likely is it to actually pass? And without making any kind of display of my own politics, there is a possibility that it could be attached to something that everybody else in the Senate wants to do. But if they can't find some kind of mule legislation to attach it to, then it'll probably have to wait for some kind of sea change in Senate politics. So, knowing all this, we have initiated a very preliminary discussion about the idea of providing a temporary ferry terminal right at Niblack that could be used by the Inter-Island Ferry Authority's Prince of Wales ferry boat. Does everybody know about the Prince of Wales and the Inter-Island Ferry Authority? Okay, the Inter-Island Ferry Authority was born several years ago by communities on Prince of Wales Island and some others, Ketchikan, Wrangell, and Petersburg, who are also participants, to build and operate ferries separately from the Alaska Marine Highway system. And they built two ferries. One is called the Prince of Wales and the other is called the Stikine. They are about 200 feet long. They cost about $15 million each to build. They hold about 35 cars. Every day, the Prince of Wales leaves Hollis on the southerly part of Prince of Wales Island and goes to Ketchikan. She leaves at 8 a.m. and gets there at 11 o'clock, waits for a few hours, goes back. It's about a 3-hour trip from the Ketchikan berth to Niblack at the speed that ship makes. So the thinking is that if we could provide a berth, she could go down there once, twice, or 3 times a week, whatever the traffic would bear, and provide access to Niblack for people, small vehicles, and goods. Niblack's large needs are still fuel, aggregate, chemicals, would still be met by barge. And there's also a possibility we could provide a similar service to Bocan Mountain. So we're pursuing those two ideas, and gives us a way to be of service without building a road, but maybe doing something else that is within our bailiwick. Sir?
Murray, you just made, I'll point out that before the Inter-Island Ferry system, when that part of the Southeast relied on the Alaska Marine system, it was a ferry once or twice a week. It was not real accommodating to the local needs. This Inter-Island Ferry is a daily ferry service.
Daily ferry service.
In the summertime, it's even twice a day if they can afford the run. So it really was quite a significant change for that region.
Sir?
Yeah, I'm curious, what's driving the Petersburg Cape initiative?
What's the resource?
Yeah.
Fish. The thought there, now I should back up. Ideas for roads to resources can come from anywhere. They all have to be blessed. The ones of any size have to be blessed by the legislature. In the 2012 legislative session, the governor introduced ideas for about 5 roads to resources projects, most of which were continuations of previous work like Ambler and Umiat. But the legislature, and it's the Senate that basically generates the capital budgets for the state. They add their own projects using whatever analytical methods they have, and this was one of those, the Petersburg extension. You may know that there's a lot of a logging road east of Cake. There's a lot of pluses for going ahead and finishing up surface access. There would still have to be a little cross-channel ferry, and I kind of imagine something similar to the Ketchikan Airport ferry that would take you from metropolitan Petersburg to the roadstead across Wrangell Narrows. Sir?
Have you guys focused at all on stopping the Forest Service from obliterating the roads and the bridges in Southeast?
Well, thank you for putting me in an untenable political position.
You're welcome.
We are certainly, the state of Alaska is party to a lawsuit brought by a number of different constituencies, including the Juneau Chamber of Commerce and Southeast Conference and a whole bunch. There's like 17 plaintiffs to try to undo the roadless rule, and they're in front of a federal judge in Washington, D.C. And it's a long fuse kind of lawsuit, and I don't know what to expect next.
Well, my question was actually focused on the ongoing effort that the Forest Service has to eliminate bridges and eliminate roads so they can't be used.
I don't know what we're doing about that. Sounds like something we ought to fight with every to the last drop of blood, but I don't know.